Chapter 4. Ethan. V was so arrogant. She thought she knew everything. Okay, so she probably knew more about the Maya than he did, but she could be so dismissive. Other than his spy books, the other things Ethan did read were non-fiction books about aliens and the unexpected. They were non-fiction, he told his sister, because they contained fact. He loved learning about conspiracy theories and weird and wonderful ideas about how and why mysterious phenomena happened. He loved stuff about the Bermuda Triangle, ghosts, and aliens. He had recently read a book on the curse of the pharaohs to fit in with his Egyptian topic at school. Luckily, V was in a different class, so she couldn't give her opinion about his curse of the pharaohs ideas, and why his classmates definitely shouldn't disturb any mummies if they came across some after taking a wrong turn in a pyramid. The jeep slowed as the jungle around them became denser, the trees forming an impenetrable wall. In places, the colossal trunks were almost within touching distance, their intertwined branches creating a twisting, mossy ceiling overhead. Without warning, the glaring Central American sun returned as a canopy disappeared, with a burning heat that made Ethan reach for a bottle of water by his side. Even behind his new sunglasses, he squinted in the bright light. They had arrived at a small, sleepy village with its huts and other simple buildings, where they were met with an exciting surprise. Their father had warned them to expect something even more adventurous than the adrenaline rush that had been their interconnecting flight earlier that day. When the noisy chug of their ride's engine had subsided, they could hear the steady thrum of rotors, and Ethan glimpsed a shining fuselage between the buildings. A helicopter ride? Seriously? Dad, you are so awesome! Ethan had gushed. He couldn't keep a small smile from his face as he watched V's face pale despite the heat. Where we're going, it would take too long to drive the jeep, Kuzar had said. Now they were all packed, squashed into the small white helicopter like sardines. Ethan still couldn't wipe the smile off his face. It had begun to fade, but was refueled by the fact that his sister's face had gone an even paler grey, as what must have been the last of the blood drained from her face. Ethan poked her. You're such a wuss, sis. Shut up, Ethan. The rotor blades whirled into a hurricane of noise, whipping up the dust around them. Before long they were soaring away from the village at the end of the road they had been travelling on, which now looked like a ribbon of yellow in a sea of green, lit up by the bright sun in the cloudless sky. His father was holding Verity's hand tightly in his. When Verity looked over at Ethan, he balled his fists up and pretended to rub his eyes and make a crying sound. He could make out over the noise of the thundering engine, and with the help of some pretty easy lip reading, "Shut up, you idiot!" It only made him do it more. After all, that's what brothers were for, surely. The world from above looked entirely different from how it did down from the ground. Now it seemed to Ethan like a computer game, a world-building game where he could clear trees here, build something there, and send his armies in to attack way over there. Ethan's mind fizzed with imagination as carpets of rich green were punctuated with the snaking strings of interconnecting roads, tiny veins in the body of the country, delivering their vehicles from one organ to another. After a stunning trip over the world below, Ethan could spot, through his newly acquired binoculars that he had made sure were handy, a clearing in the trees up ahead. He placed his binoculars up against the glass as the helicopter began to descend. The clearing looked to have been man-made recently, as there wasn't any grass to be seen. The stumps in the centre had been pulled out to give a comfortable landing spot. The helicopter was expertly brought down by the pilot with only the mildest of bumps. Ethan saw Verity give out a huge sigh, and the colour returned to her face. Don't worry, V. We've only got spiders and snakes to worry about now. Ethan loved to poke fun where he could. Verity stuck her tongue out. As the four passengers unclipped their seat belts, they could see a figure emerge from the darkness of the forest at the edge of the clearing, like a jaguar coming out into the open after lying in wait. A man in khaki cargo pants, with a green shirt unbuttoned to reveal the top of a hairy chest, walked slowly towards them, only to stop and put his dirty booted foot onto a tree stump. Resting his meaty forearm on his thigh, he retrieved a thick cigar from his shirt pocket and a lighter, then rolled the cigar in his fingers to inspect it before finally lighting it. He took in a few short puffs and remained there, casually looking at the newcomers, dark eyes peering out from beneath the brim of his leather outback hat. Around its brim was a strip of fabric like a bandolier, but rather than a succession of bullets, it held a pointed line of fanged teeth. Ethan had never seen anything quite as awesome. "Ernesto!" shouted Cruzar as he made his way over to the other man. They briefly shook hands, and Ernesto, seemingly begrudgingly, straightened up so that the men could have some quiet words with each other. Meanwhile, the children and their father took their backpacks from the tiny storage compartment on the helicopter and walked over to meet Ernesto. Cruzar introduced them as Ernesto stood with his foot propped against one of the tree stumps, puffing on his cigar. "Daniel, this is Ernesto, one of the main men here at the camp. He is an expert in artifacts. Ernesto, this is Daniel Hume from the British Museum, and his twin children, Ethan and Verity." Ethan's dad stuck out his hand. The other man looked at it for a moment, adjusted his already imposing posture and the even more imposing holsters slung over both shoulders, and then gripped Dad's hand firmly, looking Daniel in the eyes. "Hola, Senor Hume," he croaked, and smiled out of the corner of his cigar-filled mouth. "Welcome to your new home," Ernesto continued, pointing back behind him with an open hand. "It has everything you need. A bed for relief, a hole in the ground for relief, and a big tent full of equipment to study things. Lots of things." The gruff and burly man had a glint in his eye, but Ethan couldn't tell what it signified. Regardless, the man was cool. He had a faint scar running down the tanned skin of his right cheek. His chest, too, was marked, this time by a tribal-looking tattoo. Ethan couldn't help but notice that the man was festooned with weaponry, from the two large pistols that hung from the shoulder holsters to the Bowie knife strapped to his thigh. He was exactly like the hero from another of Ethan's favorite adventure video games. As if he could feel Ethan's stare, the man turned towards him and fixed him with a peculiar look. "Just in case of trouble, you know," he said, fingering the buckle that kept the dangerous-looking knife in its place, and then pointing at the teeth that decorated his wide-brimmed hat. "You won't be any trouble, though, will you?" He smiled reassuringly, first at Dad, then back at Ethan. The smile created deep wrinkles in the skin around Ernesto's mouth. His eyes, however, remained untouched, unreadable. "Such a character, this one, eh? We are lucky to have him," chuckled Cruzar, slapping Ernesto on the back, a gesture that may have toppled a slighter figure. Ernesto seemed not to have even felt it. "And now, to the camp." The three foreigners were led from the clearing and into the forest from where Ernesto had emerged. At first, the forest near the clearing was thin, and sunlight easily penetrated the trees to paint a picture of vibrant greens. Leaf litter covered the ground and crunched under Ethan's hiking boots. Soon, the trees grew thicker and sunlight filtered through the canopy of the entangled branches above, creating a mottled view of light and shade around them. Ethan hefted his heavy backpack with his smaller rucksack attached in reverse and worn on his front, along the path that had been cut through the undergrowth. It was a wide and well-trodden path due to the amount of equipment that had been lugged over it. He wasn't usually one for the wonders of natural geography, but everything around Ethan was alien to him and required closer inspection, an inspection that could never be completed as a result of the unrelenting pace they were being set. The forest, mostly dry and crackling underfoot, was unlike the gentle woods near his home, with its noisy mammals and insects jumping and flying, climbing and creeping. Tiny, swattable bugs whined about his ears as larger beetles and spiders scuttled here and there. He was a mixture of anxiety of the novel and wonder of the soon-to-be-known. Ethan swatted at a fly on his arms. His hands came back a grimy brown with a smear of red. Sweat and dirt hadn't taken long to merge into its own layer that had already coated his arms, his legs, and by the looks of Verity and Dad, his face too. He was sure this was something he would get used to. He had been warned that hot daily showers were off the hygiene menu. A diet of rain and unrelenting heat, leaves and mud, buzzing insect life, and long dead buildings. This was what his father said the coming weeks would entail. Ethan's grin was back. Soon they descended down a gentle hill, Cruzar leading the way. After a while and through a break in the trees, Ethan caught a glimpse of something. Then he lost it. "What was that?" he asked. "I saw something." He retrieved his binoculars and looked again. The group stopped and Cruzar pointed to their destination that could be seen in the near distance, across on the next hill. Stone peeked out here and there, barely visible through the forest cover, blanketed in green, a mixture of both foliage and moss. "I'm not surprised it has remained hidden for so long," Ethan remarked. "It's all so green, I can hardly see it." "Yes," said Cruzar. "Even Google Earth only has distant views of this part of the world, and those stones are quite camouflaged. So you just can't make it out. Believe me, I've tried." Ethan could just about make out a pyramid shape, not the classic smoother Egyptian style of pyramid, but the South American style of huge stone steps zigzagging their way to the summit. Verity had made a point of showing him pictures of the Maya pyramids, such as the one at the ancient Guatemalan ruins of the Maya city of Tikal. That pyramid, Ethan thought, whilst peering across from one hill to the next through his new favourite toy, was much steeper than the one he was now looking at. The one at Tikal was more open, now surrounded by grass. This temple was at one with the forest, having itself become almost natural in its secretive hiding place. "Come, we have more walking to do," and Cruzar beckoned them on.